Here's the short promise of where this is going. A quiet Sunday turned into a turning point for both of us. A nephew I thought I knew revealed a truth that changed how I see him and how I see myself. It began with a simple cup of tea, a humming fridge, and a question I'd avoided for years. What do we do with the stories our family never taught us to say out loud? Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. The morning had that soft, pearly light that slips under the curtains before you're ready for it. I'd washed the floors, set a pot roast to slow cook, and turned on the old radio that only plays golden hits if you jiggle the dial just so. My kitchen smelled like thyme and onions, and the kettle complained in little sighs. That's when Daniel, my sister's boy, knocked. He's 25, tall, with gentle eyes that always look like they've just noticed something worth saving. He doesn't usually arrive before noon. He stood on the porch with both hands around a travel mug he hadn't opened. "Can I sit a while?" he asked. I stepped aside, and he drifted in like a careful idea. We settled at the table I've had since the boys were little, a laminate top with a scratch shaped like Florida. Daniel tapped the mug, quiet. I poured tea into my grandmother's chipped cups because ceremony helps us tell the truth. He watched the steam twist and unspool. The radio hummed low. The roast clicked in the oven. The world kept doing its small, faithful tasks. He didn't. "I almost turned around," he said finally. "Twice." "That door opens both ways," I told him. "But I'm glad it opened this one." He tried a smile that didn't fit. "Aunt May, you always make it sound simple." "Not simple," I said. "Just worth doing." He nodded, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was like a hand being held out. I've learned that you don't tug a silence like that. You let it hold you both steady until one of you is ready to step. "I've been carrying something," he said. "And I think it's getting heavier because I'm carrying it alone." I folded a napkin into a neat square and laid it on the table, as if making room. He looked at it like it was a map. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once, then settled. Somewhere, a truck downshifted. Inside, the kettle clicked as it cooled, and Daniel's shoulders rose and felt like he was learning how to breathe again. "When I was a kid, everyone said I'd be an engineer," he began. "I was good at fixing things. Radios, bikes, that toaster you were about to toss." He laughed softly. "But lately, I can't fix the feeling that I'm building someone else's life. I wake up and I'm already behind in a race I don't remember entering." I thought of my own younger self, elbows deep in expectations that didn't fit, smiling like a polite storefront, while my real interests waited in the stockroom. "What does your life sound like?" I asked him, "when it's not a race?" He swallowed. "Like drawing. Like early mornings in a studio I haven't found yet. Like telling the truth without apologizing for it." We didn't rush the next part. He picked at the paper edge of his mug sleeve. I watched the steam thin to nothing. "There's more," he said. "I felt wrong for wanting different. I felt wrong for how worried I get, how loud the world can be. The other night I sat in my car for an hour because the grocery store looked like an ocean and I didn't know how to step in." His eyes shimmered, but he didn't look away. "I thought I was broken. I still do sometimes." I reached only as far as the center of the table, palm up, giving him the choice to meet it. He did. His hand was cool and careful, like a letter he wasn't sure he was allowed to open. "You're not broken," I said. "You're tender, and tender people feel the world in full color. That can ache. It can also be how beauty gets made." He exhaled in a way that sounded like he'd been holding his breath for a season. I needed someone older to say that out loud. I needed someone younger to ask, I answered, surprising myself with the honesty of it. We sat like that, 2 generations tethered by a simple touch and the courage of a confession. Somewhere, a small clock on the shelf ticked on. The roast kept softening. The radio found a song my mother loved, and for a moment I saw all of us in this kitchen. The ones who came before, the ones we're trying to become, standing shoulder to shoulder with our bags packed full of quiet, waiting for someone to say, "It's all right. You can unpack here." "Will you help me tell the rest?" Daniel asked. "Yes," I said. "But only if we agree on one thing." "What's that?" "That your life is not a problem to solve. It's a room to live in. Let's open the windows." The days after that conversation had a different texture. I kept replaying Daniel's words in my head, the way he'd said he felt like he was building someone else's life. It stirred something in me, memories of my own years when I'd smiled politely through choices that never felt like mine. That Saturday, he came by again, this time without knocking, like he knew my door was already open for him. He had a sketchbook tucked under his arm, its corners worn from being carried too long without being shared. We sat at the same kitchen table, though this time I set out sandwiches and a bowl of apples between us. The light from the window stretched across the table, catching the faint pencil dust on his hands. He didn't touch the food right away. Instead, he slid the sketchbook toward me. My fingers hovered over the cover, then I lifted it carefully, as though I was unwrapping something fragile. The first page was a storm of lines, but not messy. Alive. Buildings bent toward each other, streets coiled, and in the middle was a small figure sitting on a bench, head in hands. It was him, though younger. "This is how I felt in college," he said quietly. "Everyone rushing, everyone with a direction, and me, just noise." I turned more pages. Some were softer, landscapes with trees that seemed to breathe, faces with eyes that looked straight through the paper. Each one had a weight to it, as if the silence of those drawings had been waiting for someone else to listen. I stopped at one. A woman standing by a window, her profile lit by a lamp, her hands clasped like she was both steadying herself and praying at the same time. "That's you," he admitted. "I drew it from memory. You used to stand like that when you thought no one was looking." I felt my breath catch. "Daniel, you remembered that." He shrugged. "You always looked honest in those moments, like you were holding the world together even when no one asked you to." There it was, the truth that runs through families, the threads we don't always see but that bind us anyway. His drawings weren't just sketches. They were confessions, carefully told in graphite and shadow. "I don't think I'm meant to be an engineer," he said finally. His voice wavered, but his eyes didn't. "But saying that out loud feels like betrayal. To Mom, to everyone who bragged about me being the first in the family to make it in that field." I put the sketchbook down gently and leaned back. "Do you know what betrayal is, Daniel? It's living a life that isn't yours and making your heart carry the blame. That's the only betrayal I believe in." He looked at me with something between relief and grief. What if I fail? I reached for an apple, turning it slowly in my hand, letting the light glint off its skin. "Then you'll know you tried. And sometimes failing in the right place is worth more than succeeding in the wrong one." We ate quietly after that, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was full, like a pause in music where you know the next note will matter. Daniel closed the sketchbook, but left it on the table, not tucked away again. That was its own kind of trust. As he left, he turned at the door. "Aunt May, Can I keep coming here? To talk? To show you more? You don't even have to ask, I told him. This house is for keeping stories safe until you're ready to share them. When the door shut, I stayed at the table a long while, my hand resting on the sketchbook he'd left behind. The roast from last week was gone, the radio had fallen into static, but the room still held that same fragile honesty. I realized then that maybe the real gift of being older isn't wisdom. It's the chance to tell the younger ones, you are not strange, and you are not alone. The following week brought rain, steady and quiet, the kind that turns the world gray, but also makes you notice details you'd usually ignore. The tapping of drops against glass, the earthy smell from the garden, the way light bends in puddles. Daniel arrived without his sketchbook this time. Instead, he carried himself differently, more upright, though his eyes carried something heavy. I had soup simmering on the stove, steam fogging the kitchen windows. He sat at the table before I'd even offered, his hands folded tight like he was bracing himself. I poured us both bowls, set the bread basket down, and waited. Sometimes words only surface when you give them room. He stirred the soup without tasting it. I didn't tell you everything, he finally said. His voice was low, but steady. There's something I've hidden for years. From Mom, from Dad, from everyone. He glanced at me, then away. I thought if I said it out loud, I'd lose the family I love. The air between us thickened, like even the steam was holding its breath. I didn't press him. Instead, I tore a piece of bread, dipped it into my soup, and took a slow bite. That small act seemed to give him courage. I've been scared, he admitted. Not of the world, not even of failing, but of being rejected for who I really am. His fingers tightened around the spoon, his knuckles white. Aunt May, I don't fit the way everyone thinks I do. The life they planned for me? Engineer, husband, father. It's not me. It never was. His words landed like stones rippling across a pond. I let them settle. He was trembling slightly, but his voice sharpened as if each word was chiseling free a truth that had been trapped. I've always drawn because that's where I feel real. And there are things about me, about who I love, how I see myself, that I was too afraid to admit. The rain outside picked up, drumming on the roof. I saw in his face the fear of being cast out, the same fear that has haunted people in every family, every generation. The fear of being unrecognizable to those who raised you. I set my spoon down gently. Daniel, I said, you don't have to be afraid here. You can be all of who you are in this house. Nothing you tell me changes the fact that you are mine, my family. My love doesn't hinge on you fitting a picture. His eyes filled, and for the first time he didn't try to hide it. The tears came fast, like they'd been waiting too long. I thought you might be disappointed, he whispered. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his clenched fist until it loosened. Disappointed? No. Heartbroken? Yes. Heartbroken that you carried this alone for so long. You deserved better. He closed his eyes, and his shoulders shook. I let him cry. I didn't hush him, didn't rush him. I just sat, hand steady on his, letting the storm inside him meet the one outside. When he finally spoke again, it was almost a sigh. I'm tired of hiding. Then stop, I said softly. The people who love you will learn to love all of you. And if some don't, you'll still have me. You'll always have me. The clock on the shelf ticked on, ordinary and faithful. But something in that kitchen had shifted. A wall had crumbled, and behind it was the kind of honesty that changes not just one life, but the course of a family. Daniel lifted his spoon, finally tasting the soup. He gave a small, shaky laugh. "You always did make the best lentil soup." "And you," I said, smiling through the weight of the moment, "always did take your time getting to the truth." The rain kept falling, but inside there was warmth and something stronger than warmth. Acceptance. The day Daniel decided to tell his mother felt like the first warm day after a long winter, terrifying in its brightness, but impossible to refuse. He asked me to come with him, and I said yes without a second thought. We drove the short distance to my sister's house with the car windows cracked just enough to let the late spring air move through, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and something sweet from a neighbor's lilac bush. Daniel hummed softly beside me, a nervous rhythm that somehow steadied both of us. When we stepped into the kitchen where I had made confessions into teacups for years, Mom, my sister, looked up from her knitting. She blinked, then smiled, and for a breath I wondered whether the weight Daniel carried would make her falter. He sat down and put his hands in his lap like someone placing a fragile package on the table. I watched him find his voice under the steady light of the kitchen lamp. He spoke carefully, as if he were laying tiles, one sentence at a time, making sure each fit before moving to the next. When he reached the part about his drawings and the way his heart pulled him toward art, Mom's hands stopped moving. For a moment, all I could hear was the tick of the clock and the slow exhale of the house. Then she said simply, "I always knew you had a gentle soul." It was not the reaction Daniel had rehearsed, not the one he'd feared, but it was enough. She didn't leap to conclusions, didn't offer platitudes. She asked questions, small, careful ones that showed she was trying to understand him rather than fix or deny him. Her eyes shimmered with worry, yes, but also with a new curiosity. It was the beginning of a different conversation. After we left, Daniel hugged me, brief, grateful, like a thank you whispered into my shoulder. "You were right," he said, "about the room to live in, about the windows." I thought about how many times in my life I'd stood at a window, not sure whether to open it. I thought about how opening one had changed the shape of everything. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and I settled into a new rhythm. He came by with sketches tucked under his arm, or emailed me photos of a piece he'd finished. He enrolled in an introductory art class at the community center and started selling small prints online. It wasn't a sudden triumph. It was a steady series of small, courageous acts, each one a brick in the life he was choosing to build. His mother, while still cautious at times, began to attend his little shows and ask questions about pigments and frames the way she used to ask about thermostats and wiring. It became less about right and wrong and more about care. What surprised me was how much this changed me. I found myself telling old friends about the afternoons with Daniel, about the way admitting a fear out loud can make it lighter. I took my own hesitations out like folded laundry and shook them into the sun. There were differences to tend to, schedules to rearrange, expectations to recalibrate, but none that felt like losses. They felt like the honest cost of living. One evening, months after that first cup of tea, we sat on my back porch watching the sunset in a smear of orange that made the whole neighborhood look as if it were painted. Daniel showed me a new sketch, an open window, a bench, light pooling on the floor. "It's for you," he told me, "for opening your house to me." I held the page as if it were a map to something I'd been searching for my whole life. "You gave me a gift," I said. "You reminded me that it's never too late to choose what to keep and what to let go." He smiled in a way that made me think of the younger version of him, the boy who tinkered with radios and always fixed the loose knob on my stove. But now he was someone who had learned his own language and was speaking it out loud. In the quiet that followed, I reflected on what I wanted my legacy to be. Not the list of things I had done or the chores I had managed, but the way I had held space for truth, my own and other people's. There is a kind of courage in making room for conversations that are messy, for feelings that arrive without invitation, for love that doesn't fit the templates we've kept in drawers for decades. If I could leave anything behind, it would be a house where windows stay open, where stories can breathe, and where the younger folks know they are safe to unfold. Daniel's honesty did not solve every problem. There were hard days, awkward conversations, and moments of doubt. But they were alive, real, and shared. The weight he once carried lightened, not because the world changed overnight, but because he stopped carrying it alone. And as I watched him step forward, sometimes uncertain, often brave, I understood that family is not a set of rules. It's the continued act of choosing one another again and again, with patience and with warmth. That night I closed the porch door and left a small light on in the kitchen. It's a quiet habit, something my mother taught me, an old house's version of keeping a hand on someone's shoulder when they need it. I thought of all the people who might still be sitting in their cars, hesitant to come in. If they could hear me, I would tell them the same thing I told Daniel. Your life is a room to live in. Open the windows. Let the light in.